Hello dear friends, today I will share with you 13 scary, attractive and captivating horror stories. These are true stories that my team and I have witnessed and heard. Let's find out now. Story 1, College Friends and Camping. This story had happened years ago and I still get skeptical talking about it, but here goes. Sorry, this might be a long one. Years ago I met this lady who we will call Mai, during college. She was a beautiful and an amazing woman. Sadly, life took a sudden turn and she passed away before I can even ask her to be my girlfriend. They never really said how she passed away, but she went peacefully in her sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about her and was so heartbroken. I used to visit her grave every weekend and bring her flowers and her favorite snacks. She loved eating those Mexican candies, LOL. Now as time went by, I didn't know why, but I became even more depressed than ever. I was slowly failing my classes and didn't have the motivation to attend anymore. My mother told me I've been losing weight. How it all started was when I visited Mai's grave one last time. I decided, maybe I need to stop coming here. So I came to do what I usually do, gave her flowers and her favorite Mexican candies. As I turned around and walked back to my car, I tripped and fell down. I didn't even remember how I tripped. I quickly got up and left home. That night, I had a dream and I was at the cemetery like how I was every weekend. I was standing by Mai's tombstone when suddenly I heard someone said, "John. Los peb muse os. Los ua peb luag. John, let's go. Come and keep us company." I looked around and see two figures standing far away. They were motioning at me to come follow them. As I took a step forward, I woke up to the sound of my alarm. This was when we didn't really have cell phones yet. As I pressed it for it to stop, something fell down. I leaned forward towards the floor to see what it was, and to my surprise, it was a Mexican candy lollipop. I thought, what the heck? Maybe I must have forgot about it when I brought the candies to Mai's tombstone. Everything was normal till the next month. My friends and I went camping. It felt good to get out of town for a change. That first night, everything was fine. We were all having a good time. The second night, I had drank a bit too much so I fell asleep early. I woke up in the middle of the night and needed to pee badly. I can still hear the fire crackling and two of my buddies were still up talking. They laughed at me for being weak. I went towards the darkness to pee. Not wanting to be too close to the tents, because there were kids too. I finished peeing and then I suddenly see one of my buddy, who was one of the ones sitting by the fire earlier, walking past me. I yelled out, "Mike. Where are you going?" He ignored me and kept going, so I was like okay whatever. I was about to turn around and head back when suddenly I heard Mike said, "John hee. Come here." I turned back around, but Mike wasn't there. I turned back towards the campsite and I can see Mike and my other buddy Lou sitting down and laughing. My whole body froze and I felt every inch of my hair stood up. I didn't care to look back and quickly ran back towards the campsite. My buddies were surprised and asked me what was wrong. I didn't tell them anything, but the look from my face, they knew I saw something. We didn't say anything else and decided to head back into our tents. That same night I had the same dream again. Standing by Mai's tombstone and the two people telling me, "John. Let's go. Come and keep us company." But this time, they told me, "We need one more person." The next day we packed and left camp. I finally told my parents everything and they yelled at me for going to the graveyard. We did Jingle Bell and the shaman told us that, because I kept being sad and going to the graveyard. A spirit there wanted to take me with him. They needed to go as threes. For the lollipop in my room, that was Mai. She was the second person and that was why they made me trip that day. For camp, when I saw Mike, they wanted me to follow them and so I can get lost in the woods. My two buddies said they did hear me calling out Mike, and they were like, WTF? Who was he talking to, 'cause I'm right here. So when I came running back, they already knew something was up. I changed my name and everything, but this experience was something I could never forget. Story 2, Kuflub Sheng. Growing up on the East Coast where I'm from, there aren't that many Hmong people, but we had enough families to have a New Year party each year. In the town I lived in, there were only 3 Hmong families, and all the kids went to the same school. I had known her all my life, but it wasn't until 8th grade that I really noticed her. Maybe it was because of puberty, lol, but her name was Sheng. There were a few other Hmong girls at school, but she stood out to me the most. We grew closer that year, and the summer before my freshman year was the best. Everyone knows what's up, lol. Back to the story. At the beginning of freshman year, Sheng and I started dating, and we stayed together for the whole year. Sophomore year, we broke up 3 or 4 times, but we always got back together. By junior and senior year, we were inseparable. We were high school sweethearts, and we planned to go to the same college together. By our senior year, we were voted most likely to get married. Everyone knew Sheng and I loved each other deeply. It wasn't just puppy love. The day before our Hmong graduation party, I told my parents that I wanted to marry Sheng. When I asked Sheng's parents for their blessing, they weren't surprised. They gave their approval, saying it was fine as long as I took care of their daughter. At the graduation party, I got down on one knee in front of everyone and asked Sheng to spend the rest of her life with me. She said yes. That night, Sheng came home with me and my family, and we performed the traditional Hmong wedding ceremony with the chicken. That summer, we had a full traditional Hmong wedding. If you know anything about Hmong weddings, you know the groom gets pretty wasted, thanks to the bride's family, and I definitely did. After the summer, we moved into a small apartment near campus. Everything felt perfect. We were newlyweds, starting college together, away from our parents. After the first semester, though, Sheng found out she was pregnant. We moved back in with my parents so she could stay home while I continued going to school. Each day, I went to class and came back home to Sheng. Month by month, her belly grew, and soon, we welcomed our baby girl, Keisha. A few months after Keisha was born, Sheng and I were invited to a wedding. My parents offered to watch Keisha for the night so we could enjoy ourselves. We drove home late that night, around 11 p.m., after the wedding. I was fine to drive, I wasn't drunk, and I wasn't tired. But about 30 to 45 minutes into the drive, we were in a terrible accident. A witness at the intersection said that a speeding vehicle, with its lights off, ran a red light and crashed into us. The police report said the impact caused my car to flip over several times. I was barely conscious and don't remember much, but I do recall seeing them put Sheng into a body bag while they loaded me onto a stretcher. I wanted to get to her, but the pain and confusion overwhelmed me, and I passed out. I woke up late the next day in the hospital. My family was there, and so was my daughter. When I saw her, flashes of that night came back to me, and I remembered seeing Sheng in that body bag. I asked my parents what happened, and they told me she didn't survive. I tried to hold it in, but I broke down. My best friend, my high school sweetheart, the love of my life, my wife, was gone. We waited 2 weeks for Sheng's burial. A week after that, strange things started happening. My family kept hearing knocks at the door, but when we opened it, no one was there. My parents said it was Sheng. But I wasn't afraid. How could I be scared of someone I loved so much? A few nights after that, something sat on me while I was sleeping. I was on my back, arms near my head. At first, I was scared, but then I smelled Sheng's perfume, the one from Abercrombie that she always wore and I loved. I felt pressure on my left arm and chest, and my knee touched something cold, her leg. Sheng was there. I was flooded with emotion, scared but happy at the same time. She began to cry and said to me, I miss you so much, Yancy. I can't bear to be without you. Come with me." I cried and told her how much I missed her, too, but I reminded her about our daughter, Keisha. I told her that our little girl needed at least one parent. Sheng agreed, saying I was right, and told me she had to go. I told her it was okay, and I drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I thought it had all been a dream, until I saw my arm and bedsheet stained with dried mascara. I knew then it wasn't a dream. I didn't tell my parents because I didn't want them to call a shaman for a cleansing. A few nights later, it happened again. I smelled her perfume, felt her cold back against my chest, and heard her crying. Once again, she begged me to come with her. Tears streamed down my face as I told her I missed her but couldn't leave Keisha. I promised Sheng that I would join her one day, once our daughter no longer needed me. We would go together in the next life and be reincarnated, staying together forever. She asked if I was lying. I kissed her on the back of her head and said, "I love you, Sheng. Why would I lie to you?" She seemed satisfied and left for the night. Now, my daughter Keisha is almost 2. It's been about 2 years since the accident. I visit Sheng's grave regularly on her birthday and our anniversary. Every once in a while, when she misses me, she visits at night. I still miss her deeply. I don't think of Sheng as a ghost but as our daughters and my guardian angel. I know Keisha needs me now, and Sheng understands that. But 60 or 70 years down the road, when my time comes, I won't be afraid to die, because I believe Sheng and I will be together again in the next life. Story 3, Doppelganger. I have a scary experience that happened to me and my significant other. For those who may not know, a doppelganger is someone who looks exactly like another person but isn't their twin. It's an apparition in the form of a double of a living person. So here's my story, fair warning, it's a bit long. About 2 years ago, my boyfriend, who was white, and I went out drinking with a couple of friends at a bar. Around midnight, we all decided to head home. On the way to drop off his buddy, my boyfriend and I ended up getting into a stupid drunk argument. His buddy, who was Mexican, lived near Coon Rapids Dam. Note, anyone familiar with the area in MN knows that the dam has a haunted reputation due to numerous accidental drownings and suicides. After dropping off his buddy, my boyfriend got out of the car and started walking toward the road. His mom also lives out that way. I stayed at his buddy's house, thinking my boyfriend just needed to cool off and would return. By 2 a.m. he still hadn't come back. I tried calling his phone multiple times, but there was no answer. I figured he might have gone to his mom's house and fallen asleep, so I decided to wait until morning to go get him, realizing I had work at 8 a.m. His buddy suggested that my boyfriend might have walked to the dam, which was about 3 blocks away. We decided to drive over and look for him, thinking he may have passed out somewhere. That's when things got strange. As we pulled into the dam area, there were woods to my left that were partially lit. Just as we turned in, we saw someone or something that looked exactly like my boyfriend, same clothes, same hat, everything. My boyfriend has a unique walk that's easy to spot, and this figure moved just like him, crossing in front of the headlights and running into the woods. I stopped the car immediately. His buddy was sure it was him and got out to call his name, while I slowly drove alongside, shining a flashlight into the woods. But there was no sign of him. We circled the dam for about an hour, calling his name and trying to spot the light from his cell phone in the woods. Nothing. We thought maybe he was hiding from us out of anger. When we still hadn't found him, we decided to head back to the house, thinking he might have returned on his own. But no luck, he wasn't there either. I kept trying to call, but still no answer. That's when my buddy suggested that maybe we scared him off by driving, and we should walk instead. I agreed because by then, I was getting scared and worried. We walked back to the dam and stayed there for another hour, calling out for him. Still, no response. Finally, I gave up and headed back to my buddy's house, hoping my boyfriend would call once he woke up. I stayed there, drifting off to sleep, knowing I had to work with very little rest. Around 6 a.m. I got a text from my boyfriend saying he was home and wondering where I was. I was confused and told my buddy that he had been at home the whole time. I rushed back home, and sure enough, my boyfriend was on the couch. He told me that after we argued, he called our other friend, the one who was drinking with us, to pick him up from a gas station and take him home. He had left his cell phone in their car, so he had to message me through his computer. I asked if he had ever gone to the dam, and he gave me the most baffled look and said, "Why on earth would I go to the dam in the middle of the night, knowing it's haunted?" That's when I got chills. After work, I came home and fell asleep, only to wake up with nightmares. When I got up, I felt a burning sensation on my arm and noticed 3 scratch marks. Freaked out, I contacted my aunt, who is a shaman. She came over right away, blessed the house with hot peppers, and said something followed me from the dam. It had taken the shape of my boyfriend because we kept calling his name. She gave me a copper bracelet and told me not to go back to the dam for a year. Since then, I haven't returned to the dam. Whatever it was, it had taken the form of my boyfriend that night. Even though my boyfriend isn't from my cultural background, he understood our beliefs, and when he asked his buddy about what happened, his buddy confirmed that he, too, saw my boyfriend run into the woods. There was no doubt in his mind. Story 4, American River Boarding Ticket, The Ghost Ocean Fossil. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, my family needed a break from isolation, so we took a drive down California's Highway 1. We stumbled upon a quiet, untouched cove and decided to stop to enjoy the ocean breeze. To our surprise, we bumped into my husband's cousins. We laughed, saying, "Of all places." They had never been there before and, just like us, had stopped randomly. After a brief chat, we parted ways and continued exploring the beach. My husband, being the curious type, started picking up seashells and eventually found a pale fossil about the size of his palm. It looked ancient. He carried it to my car, placed it in the center console, and we headed home. That night, my husband left for work at 2:30 a.m., leaving me, our daughter, and the dogs at home. At 3 a.m., the doorbell rang, and the dogs began barking furiously. Confused, I woke up and looked through the peephole. Standing there was a pale young woman with long black hair, wearing a white nightgown. She was eerily still and alone. "Are you okay?" I asked through the door. No response. She didn't even move. I asked again, louder this time, "Are you okay?" Still no answer. Then, slowly, she began turning sideways, pressing her body against the door, as if she could squeeze between the door and the frame. She pressed her eye against the peephole, staring straight at me. I jumped back in fear. I thought, "That's it, I'm calling the police." But before I could act, she began walking backward, retreating from the door. I looked through the peephole again, and to my horror, she was standing by my car, then she simply vanished into thin air. I stood there, frozen. Did that really just happen? The next day, I told my husband everything. Then, a chilling thought crossed my mind, the fossil. "Did you bring it inside?" I asked. "No," he replied, "it's still in your car." I went to check. Despite the summer heat in California, the inside of the car was as cold as it had been at the beach the day before. I sat inside, opened the center console, and there lay the fossil. Concerned, I contacted an artist whose parents were shamans. They explained that the fossil was tied to a female spirit who had followed my husband, believing him to be her new owner. The spirit had been waiting for someone to take her from the ocean. Panicking, I asked, "How do we get rid of her?" They replied, "You can't reverse it, only your husband can." He needs to send her back with a boarding ticket made from Joss paper and tell her to find a new owner, that he never wanted her. That evening, we visited the shamans and picked up the Joss paper they had prepared for us. Thankfully, they reassured us that all we had to do was burn the Joss paper while my husband recited the words they provided. All Sacramento rivers lead to the ocean, they explained, so you don't need to return to the same location. We stopped by the American River, near Sac State. My husband placed the fossil on a rock and, as instructed, recited, "You need to find a new owner. I'm giving you this boarding ticket to return and find someone else." We lit the Joss paper, and as it burned, I felt a heavy weight lift from my chest. The smoke rose into the sky. No more 3M visits. Story 5, One Last Visit. This is a story about my sister's husband's cousin and his wife. About 2 years ago, his cousin got married. They were together for a year, but despite trying everything, she couldn't conceive a child. Nothing worked. Eventually, he gave up hope and started having an affair with another woman. One day, no one else was home except for his wife. The husband had gone to work, and his parents were out at the store. When they returned, they found her unconscious in the bedroom. They immediately called him, urging him to come home, and rushed her to the hospital. The mother-in-law stayed behind in case the kids returned home from school early. About half an hour after they left for the hospital, there was a knock at the door. The mother-in-law opened it, surprised to see her daughter-in-law standing there. She asked, "Nayab, why are you back already? Didn't you just leave for the hospital a little while ago?" Her daughter-in-law didn't respond. She only stared at the floor, looking pale and unwell. She shook her head but didn't say a word. The mother-in-law invited her inside, then turned to head back to the living room. When you enter the house, the stairs are straight ahead, and the living room is to the right. The daughter-in-law stepped inside and closed the door but didn't follow. She simply stood there, head bowed. "Why are you standing there? Where's your father-in-law and my son?" the mother-in-law asked. Her daughter-in-law remained silent, her gaze now fixed on the wall. Slowly, she began making her way up the stairs. Finding this behavior odd, the mother-in-law was about to approach the staircase when the phone rang. She turned to answer it. On the other end was her husband. "Where are you?" she asked. "I'm still at the hospital," he replied. "Nayab passed away before we even got here. She died from an overdose." The mother-in-law froze. She glanced back at the staircase. "But she was just here. How can she be dead?" she stammered. "No, her body is here at the hospital," the father-in-law said. "She's gone. She couldn't possibly be there." The mother-in-law dropped the phone and raced upstairs, desperate to confirm what she had seen. But when she reached the bedroom, her daughter-in-law was nowhere to be found. Only a note, addressed to her husband, lay on the bed where her body had been. Frightened and shaken, the mother-in-law called for them to return home. In my opinion, she came back one last time to say goodbye to her husband. I don't know what was written in the note, and out of respect for the family, I didn't ask. Story 6, Workout Wanderer. This is my first story, but I have more to come if you all like this story. Last summer, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, I used to power walk around a 2.5-mile man-made lake. It was in a shape of a weird elongated oval and has 3 parking areas around the outer circumference. The longest part of the lake is just surrounded with vast forest and farmland. This place has 2 areas where people like to fish, which are located at opposite sides of the lake. I power walked for about 2 months around this place every day after work around 3:40 p.m. to lose weight. I was in a state of my life where I became pretty obese, and to those who are wondering why I didn't jog, it's because I have horrible shin splits. For those who don't know Oklahoma, their summers are brutal with hot humid weather. It was 110-120 degrees for 2 weeks straight. So I was pretty crazy to walk at that time, but I was determined to lose weight. Most people wouldn't show up there until sunset. So, most days I would be there by myself. One day I arrived there and I saw an older black Honda Civic parked in the parking lot where I usually park. I got out and did some stretching. The lake is located up a hill and pretty deep as well. I walked up the hill and took a glance around. There was a dark figure sitting on a ledge near the electric fence. I thought nothing of it because that is where people usually fish. So, it was only me and that person there. I put in my earbuds, blasted up my MP3 player and started walking towards that person because that was my normal direction I walked every day. It was about a half a mile between us. So as I got closer, the dark figure turned out to be a young Asian girl. I could tell from a distance because I could see her black shoulder-length hair waving in the breeze. Behind where she was sitting was a staircase down the hill which led to the 3RD parking spot. I saw a 98 brown Toyota Camry parked there and thought to myself, typical Hmong car. As I got closer to her, I saw that she was a pretty Hmong or Viet girl around 19 years old. Her right leg hung off the edge of the ledge and the other pulled up against her chest. She was wearing a hot pink tank top and black sweatpants. She was just sitting there enjoying the view and would occasionally sneak a glance at me, then she would look back out into the lake. When I got closer, I saw that she wasn't wearing any shoes. She had a pair of old beat-up white sneakers by her side. When I walked right by her, I could see she was looking at me from the corner of her eyes. As I walked by, a breeze came and she had on some strong perfume. All of a sudden I felt a sensation of sadness come over me. As I got further away, that feeling disappeared. I kept on walking and would occasionally glance over my shoulder to see if anyone was coming behind me because I get startled pretty easily. Keep in mind my headphones were on full blast. As I looked back, I could still see that girl sitting in the same place. Then I saw a work buddy drive by the side of the road, honked his horn, waved and drove away. Shortly after, I turned back to check if anyone was coming up behind me and I was shocked. That girl was now just black figure. She had no more hair and I couldn't make out the colors of her clothing anymore. I thought to myself, come on man, it's hot out. Your mind is playing tricks on you. I have excellent vision, 20/10, which is above normal. I was about 3/4 of a mile from her, so I know I should still be seeing things fine at that distance. At this point, I was only about a mile and a half into the walk and my car was on the opposite side of the lake. To make it worse, this is where the vast forest area started and there was nowhere else to exit the lake perimeter. My heart sunk and adrenaline kicked in. I turned back to convince myself my eyes were deceiving me. So I looked at the fence behind her and other more detailed structures. I could make them out to every detail, but she was still a black figure. I turned around and picked up my pace, trying to stay calm by silently talking to myself. All of a sudden, I saw an elderly lady walking in front of me. The elder lady was further away from the girl, but I could see she was wearing brown shorts and a white t-shirt. I glanced back and now she stood up, but she was taller than the fence. That fence is easily 7 feet high. Now I was in a semi-jogging mode and wished in my mind for her not to follow me. My only goal now was to catch up to that old lady. I glanced back again and according to my wish, she was leaving by going down the stairs behind where she was sitting. But the problem was that she just glided down the stairs. That freaked that crap out of me because it's 4:00 p.m. in the afternoon. My next wish was for her not to pop out of the forest, which she didn't. Thank God. I finally caught up to the old lady, passed her, got in my car and drove home. The next day at work, I asked my work buddy if he had seen a girl up at the lake with me and a brown Toyota Camry parked in the parking lot. He said all he saw was me. That verified my suspicion and scared the crap out of me. I told him what happened to me and it got him worked up as well. I finally went to tell my mom-in-law, which is a shaman. From her reaction, I knew the girl I saw was not of the living. She did a jingle bell session for me and my family. She told me that that girl was a spirit that's been watching me for over a month's time. She finally appeared there to attract me, which takes a high amount of energy to appear in front of the living, meaning she was a powerful spirit. I asked her what that spirit wanted. She replied, "It's obvious she wanted you." My mom-in-law told me not to worry because she had taken care of that girl and tied a white and red string around my wrist, which I still wear today. She told me to never go walking there alone again. I didn't want to take a chance, so I never walked there again. Now that I think about it, it was as if I was under her spell or something. I didn't see that old lady until my friend drove by. It's as if he broke the spell. Till this day, I still get the shivers just thinking about this. Story 7, ICU Shenanigans, Ghost Stories Gone Wrong. So picture this, I'm a small kid, and my favorite auntie ends up in the ICU after her crusty husband, now certified ex-trash, decided to try out his best Street Fighter moves on her. The dude hit harder than lag in an online game. Auntie caught a broken jaw, broken arm, she tried to block, but clearly wasn't pressing the right buttons, concussion, black eye, liver bruise, and wait for it, a coma. The doctors were like, she'll live, but IDK when she's logging back in. Auntie was literally the nicest person ever, and my little brain couldn't comprehend why her man went full Mortal Kombat on her. This woman didn't even have kids, but she still copped a PlayStation so us kids could go ham on Tekken 3 when we visited. So yeah, when she got hospitalized, not only were we sad, but we also couldn't play any more tragic. Turns out, her husband was a crackhead. Like, full-on boss level. No wonder he thought he was in Fight Club. Anyway, my parents hit me with the "you're gonna visit auntie every day" quest, so I did. I told the bus driver, drop me off at the hospital, and my mom picked me up after work. The doctors said people in comas could still hear you, so I figured, why not give auntie a live podcast of ghost stories? I went full storyteller mode and hit her with some nightmare fuel because she loved spooky stuff. One time, I told her about this girl who got body slammed by a ghost straight chilling. Auntie also loved jokes, so I hit her with a classic, what do you call a clumsy Asian kid? Som Ting Wong. I swear, she smiled, coma. Nah, auntie was vibing. Here's where the spooky stuff kicks in. One night, my mom had to work late, so I was left at the hospital until nighttime. Naturally, I knocked out next to auntie's bed. And that's when he appeared. This tall, skinny, smuff-colored dude showed up in my dream and was like, "Yo, can you not with the ghost stories? Auntie's not feeling it." He mumbled a bunch of other stuff, but honestly, I had zero cares to give and completely forgot. I woke up like, weird dream, but whatever. Spoiler, the blue dude was auntie's spirit bodyguard, and apparently, she was out here spooked by my stories, but being in a coma, she couldn't exactly tell me to shut up. Did I stop telling ghost stories? Absolutely not. I figured auntie was living her best coma life with my spooky tales. The blue dude showed up in my dreams again, like, dude, I'm serious, stop. But I was like, nah, I'm built different. Then, one day, while I'm hitting auntie with the scariest story ever, she starts shaking and making noises. At first, I'm like, yo, are we good? But then I'm like, wait, am I breaking through? So naturally, I ramped up the spooky stories, talking faster like I was Eminem at the final rap battle. Auntie's heart rate monitor started going berserk, so I thought, yo, she's totally waking up. But then, beep. The nurses stormed in like they were in Grey's Anatomy, and I'm just standing there like, wow, y'all are taking this way too seriously. One nurse tells me, sweetie, you almost gave your auntie a heart attack, maybe chill with the ghost stories. But as a kid, I had the brainpower of a potato and was like, heart attack. What's that? So I kept telling my spooky stories, and Auntie kept doing her little shake and sound routine. Here's a fun twist, the Mexican nurse thought I was some sort of little demon. Every time she saw me, she'd start praying and flash her cross at me like she was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I thought she was just extra, but one day, she dropped her keys, and I tried to give them back. She full-on sprinted to her car, and when I caught up, she hit the floor, praying for divine intervention. I was just standing there like, girl, I'm just trying to return your keys. Okay, now it gets real spooky. So there was this sweet old grandma in the bed next to Auntie's, separated by a single sad curtain. We became homies real quick. She told me her family never visited her, yikes, and that I was the only one who ever talked to her. She couldn't walk, so I told her, don't worry, Grandma, when I grow up, I'll find a way to make your legs work again. She said I was the sweetest kid ever, and we bonded over spaghetti and ghost stories. Yeah, she shared her hospital spaghetti with me. That's true friendship. One day, Grandma died, but I didn't know that yet. So I'm chilling at Auntie's bed, and suddenly, Grandma shows up behind me and taps my shoulder. She's like, you need to stop telling your auntie ghost stories, she's freaked out every night in the dark. And I'm like, wait, hold up, aren't your legs supposed to be paralyzed? She said the skinny blue dude told her to come tell me, and I'm thinking, this guy again. I tried to brush it off, but she said, nah, it's real, he's standing right over there. I looked, but I didn't see anyone. Grandma said her goodbyes and left. That's when it hit me, her wheelchair was still by the bed, and I had just seen a ghost. 5 minutes later, I pulled the curtain back, and Grandma was lying there, still as a statue. I shook her arm, like, Grandma. Hello. No response. I even offered her some spaghetti I had in my backpack, but she didn't move. The nurses came in, and that's when they told me she had passed away. The Mexican nurse gave me that look again and pointed her cross at me like I was gonna combust. The other nurse was like, chill, don't freak out the kid. Honestly, I wasn't even scared, I was just sad. Even after Grandma died, nobody came to see her. Like, how are you gonna leave your grandma on read like that? I told my parents about the blue dude and my ghost dreams, and they went DEFCON 1, calling in a shaman to do some ritual, UA-Neeb, for me. After that, the blue dude dipped, and I stopped having those spooky dreams. Fast forward a month and a half, and Auntie finally wakes up from her coma. Everyone was hyped. She told us that during the coma, she kept dreaming about a little ghost girl chasing her, probably because of my non-stop ghost stories. Oops. Auntie dumped her crackhead ex, gave me her PlayStation as a thank you, and married a decent guy. Now they're living their best lives. Auntie, if you're reading this, I'll see y'all at Thanksgiving. And I promise no ghost stories. Story 8, the one to remember, the final goodbye. To all of you reading this, it may not be a scary story, but I feel like I need to share her story, so that people can see others in a different light. This is about a friend, a true friend. Her name was Chastity Xiong. She was a kind-hearted girl, and she would have turned 16 on December 17th. She was diagnosed with cancer at the end of her 8th grade year, and by that summer, she had lost all her hair due to the treatment. When freshman year came, her friends started avoiding her, treating her like she was the ugliest thing in the world. People thought she was strange, bullying her verbally, calling her names, and asking if she was a boy or a girl. They stared at her in the halls and made her life miserable. All she wanted was to be a normal teenage girl. Eventually, she couldn't handle the cruelty anymore, so she dropped out of high school, thinking she really was as ugly as people made her feel. But the truth was, she was truly beautiful. On March 24th, her condition worsened, and she was placed on life support 24/7. I had been visiting her regularly, and she was fighting hard, but eventually, her body couldn't take it anymore. Her last day was September 28th, 2012. That night, she called me, but I ignored it because it was a private number. I assumed it was a prank call. I had planned to visit her that day, but instead, I went out when I should have been by her side. That night, she passed away, and I didn't even know until she appeared in my dream. That night, I hung out with some friends. I got home around 8 p.m., exhausted, and immediately fell asleep. In my dream, I was sitting beside Chastity's hospital bed, just like I always had. But this time, I was crying uncontrollably, unable to speak. She spoke to me in a tearful voice, telling me that she had tried calling earlier because the doctors had told her she wouldn't make it through the night. She had wanted to see me one last time in person before she left, but it didn't happen. She said she wished she could have stayed longer, but her time was up. She thanked me for being there for her when no one else was, for all the flowers I had brought her, and for being the closest thing to a boyfriend she would ever have. She hoped we would meet earlier in the next life, where we could be together without her cancer. She thanked me for changing her life when she was at her lowest, for making her last days happy, and for showing her how important her life was. Then, while still crying, she smiled and said her final goodbye before slowly disappearing. I woke up in a panic and snuck out of my house through the window, running all the way to Regions Hospital. It was already around 11 p.m., and I live about 10-12 blocks away. I ran up the 4 flights of stairs, desperate to see her one last time. At first, they didn't let me in, but one of her doctors recognized me from my frequent visits and allowed me to see her. That's when I found out she was already gone brain dead, though her heart was still beating. I was devastated, repeating sorry over and over, knowing she couldn't hear me. Sorry for not picking up her calls. Sorry for not being there when I should have. I was eventually asked to leave, as her parents had decided to take her off life support. I walked home slowly that night, crying myself to sleep, not wanting to believe any of it was real. Someone who fought so hard and stayed strong for so long shouldn't have died like that. So think twice about your life. Is it good or bad? Appreciate what you have, because Chastity had so little from the start. She was too young to die. It wasn't her fault she had to live that way. Think twice before you judge someone. Society is messed up, and we're the ones making it that way. No one deserves what she went through. Story 9, The Ghost Baby. This incident happened to John and a couple of his cousins, Mary, Terry, and his younger brother Harry. On a Saturday night in October, in Wisconsin, John decided it was too late and too dark to head home after hanging out with his cousins. His cousins suggested he stay over, and since there was no ride available, John agreed. None of their parents were home that night, so they thought it would be fun to have a sleepover. After staying up late eating ice cream, chips, and watching movies, Mary fell asleep downstairs in the living room. John, Terry, and Harry went upstairs to sleep in Terry's bedroom. As soon as they got to the room, Harry went straight to bed and was out cold. The room was quiet, with only the sound of Harry's snoring filling the space. 30 minutes passed, and John still couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the soft drip of water in the pipes. Drip, drip, drip. Boom. Then suddenly, he heard the distinct cry of a baby. The sound was clear, like a newborn, maybe 2 or 3 months old, crying for a couple of minutes. When the crying stopped, John was puzzled. Why was he hearing a baby in his cousin's house? Then it hit him there wasn't supposed to be a baby here. John called out into the dark room, "Did anyone else hear that?" Out of nowhere, Terry replied, "Heck yeah." That's when the fear really hit them. They huddled under the blankets, nervously joking that it had to be a ghost. Everything was quiet again. About 15 minutes later, the baby's cries started up once more, this time growing louder and louder, happening every few minutes. John and Terry were getting seriously freaked out now. Then there was a sudden crash from halfway down the stairs. John remembered a heavy plywood leaning against the stair wall. As soon as the crash echoed, the baby's cries intensified, sounding like they were getting closer to the bedroom. Then, suddenly, all went silent. The door to the bedroom wasn't fully closed, leaving a thin crack of darkness visible. John's heart raced as he heard a faint tick, 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 the sound of the door creaking open. The gap widened to about 3 to 5 inches. Slowly, a white mist began to materialize in front of the door. It floated across the room and sat down right beside Terry on the bed. John was frozen in terror as he had the clearest view of the fog's movements. The figure, resembling a person, settled right next to Terry. John whispered, "That white fog is sitting next to you." Without thinking twice, Terry leaped toward John like a scared child, screaming, "Ah!" They both dove under the blankets. When they finally peeked out again, the ghostly figure had vanished. As the eerie events unfolded, the baby's cries stopped, and the two lay there, too terrified to move or turn on the lights, afraid something under the bed might grab them. Later, Terry fell asleep, but not peacefully. In his dream, a dark figure tried to pull him toward it while his grandma, who had recently passed away, pulled him in the opposite direction. In reality, Terry was experiencing sleep paralysis. He felt himself fall toward the dark figure before finally breaking free. He asked John if he had heard him crying out for help. John, still shaken, responded, "Yes, but I was too scared to do anything." As they lay there, wondering what might happen next, John began to hear faint whispers coming from downstairs. No one else was in the house except for them, and Mary was still asleep. John couldn't make out what the whispers were saying, but he was certain he was hearing something. He asked Terry if he heard it too. Terry confirmed the whispers. This went on for about 15 minutes, and then they stopped. As soon as the whispering ceased, the baby's cries resumed. This eerie cycle repeated until Terry's mom returned home from work. When they told her what had happened, she brushed it off, telling them not to worry and to go back to sleep. It's important to note that Terry's mom was a shaman. The following week, they took Terry for a spiritual reading to understand what had caused the incident. They discovered that during a visit to Minnesota, Terry had unknowingly come across the spirit of a dead baby. The baby's ghost had followed him home, seeking to take his soul. To rid themselves of the spirit, the family had to perform a cleansing ritual with jingle bells. Story 10, A Mother's Love. This story is a bit long, but it's both terrifying and tragic. Bear with me. Back in the days of Hmong Pride and Hmong Online, around 2003-2005, my cousin met a girl from out of state. They chatted, exchanged numbers, and fell in love within 4 months. Eventually, she visited him and didn't want to leave, so they got married. A year later, they welcomed a beautiful daughter into the world. After a few days in the hospital, they returned home. The new mother, still weak from giving birth, went to the bathroom, where she slipped and hit her head. Despite my cousin living just a block away from the hospital, she was rushed there but tragically pronounced dead. At that moment, their daughter was only a week old. A week later, her funeral was held. At the service, a medium, someone who can communicate with the dead, told my mom, "Her body is here, but her spirit isn't." My mom was freaked out. Not 2 minutes later, my cousin received a phone call from his sister, who was home alone babysitting his daughter. She said she had been seeing a woman dressed in traditional Hmong clothing walking around the block. It was about 1 a.m. on the first night of the funeral. My cousin and I rushed home, but when we got there, everything seemed normal. As the funeral days passed, my cousin sank into deep depression. To help him cope, my mom suggested that my brothers and I spend the night with him to keep him company. I didn't want to go because of my past experiences with paranormal activity, but my mom insisted. When we arrived and my mom left, a strong, chilling wind blew, scaring my brother and me. We ran inside and spent the night, but nothing happened. Still, my cousin was heartbroken and told us he would never marry again. I told him I didn't believe him and that he would move on. 2 days later, we were back home. It was a Sunday night, and my brothers and I were getting ready for bed. Meanwhile, my mom stayed up, sewing her pa dao by the front door in the living room. To her right was a pitch-black door that led to the garage, which had been converted into a room. As we were talking before bed, we suddenly heard my mom scream and curse, "Get out of here. You're gone already, just go." My brothers and I rushed out of our rooms to check on her, and she told us she had seen my cousin's late wife standing there, watching her. We were all freaked out, and after that, everyone went to bed. The next day, just 2 weeks after the death of my cousin's wife, my cousin told us to go hang out with some girls. Soon after, he met someone new, and within 3 months, they were married. Fast forward 4 years into their marriage, and my cousin now had 2 daughters, the one from his first marriage and another with his new wife. His daughters were just a year apart in age, with the eldest being 5 and the youngest 4. One day, the new wife gave both daughters a bath. After taking her own daughter out first, she realized there was only one towel. She quickly took her daughter to the bedroom to grab another towel for her stepdaughter. But when she returned to the bathroom, she found her stepdaughter lying dead on the floor. The little girl had slipped and hit her head just like her mother. We all believed that the first wife had come back for her daughter. To this day, my cousin's younger daughter, the one from his second marriage, still sees her stepsister. They play together, jump on the couches, and pretend to play house, as if the older sister had never left. Story 11, The Man by the Window. It was one night when I went to spend the night with my 17-year-old cousin and 19-year-old aunt, along with a baby girl we were babysitting for the day. We were all girls, so after putting the baby to bed in the master bedroom and turning on the monitor, we tiptoed to the living room, connected the monitor there, and sat in the dark sharing gossip and scary stories. The house was in pitch black, with no light leaking in besides the glow from our phones or the red light of the baby monitor. The only source of natural light was the moon outside the back door, where the blinds were pulled to the side, exposing the backyard. If I remember correctly, it was a full moon. There we were, kicking back and telling stories passed down from our parents and cousins about Laos and Thailand. When it was my turn, I froze. My cousins asked me what was wrong, but I was too terrified to speak. Through the glass door, there was a man completely still, just standing there and staring into the house. He didn't move or say a word, his hands down at his sides, his head slightly tilted. He was only about 2 feet from the door, so he was incredibly close. My cousins, confused, kept asking me what the issue was. I shushed them harshly and told them in a low, calm voice not to move at all and to stay quiet. They finally caught on and started to turn their heads to see what I was looking at. But I immediately said again, "Don't move, seriously," because I was already panicking a little more as they weren't listening. We stayed still for what felt like 5-10 minutes, and then the man finally, slowly, stepped back from the glass and began walking around the house. He moved so slowly, it was like watching something from a horror movie. I finally let out a breath and quickly told the girls what I saw. They started freaking out, which made me angry. I told them to pull it together. We crawled toward the bedroom to check on the baby. As we dragged ourselves across the carpet, I reminded them to be absolutely quiet. But my aunt accidentally knocked something onto the tile floor, which echoed loudly through the house. And as you might guess, we heard the sound of shoes coming back around the house, followed by tapping against the glass. We rushed to the bedroom, relieved to see the baby still asleep. But my cousin slammed the door a bit too hard, and the man began pounding on the glass instead of tapping lightly. He started saying in a deep voice, "I'm here to help. Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." He sounded young and was tall and built, judging by his figure. As time passed, the pounding grew harder, and his voice louder, demanding to be let in, which woke the baby. She wailed and cried, making everything even scarier. We were locked in a room with a man trying to break in, and we didn't know what to do. The baby monitor in the living room was going off like crazy, and I knew the man could hear it, confirming we were inside. We didn't know where the other monitor in the master bedroom was since it was too dark to see, and none of us wanted to turn on a light to find it. I told the girls I'd quickly crawl to the living room and turn it off from there. I slipped out of the room and made my way toward the living room. My heart was pounding, and I could barely breathe from fear. When I reached the corner where the living room was, I could see the red light of the monitor and hear the baby's cries. I also glanced at the glass door and saw the man still there, pounding away like he was determined to break in. I dashed across the room, hid behind the shelf where the monitor was, and yanked the cord like my life depended on it. When the baby's crying stopped, so did the pounding. I stayed hidden behind the shelf for what felt like an eternity, about 7-10 minutes. I was terrified, wondering if the man knew I was there or if he had figured out I had unplugged the monitor. I was silently panicking, praying I'd make it through. Eventually, I worked up the nerve to glance at the door. The glass was empty. I let out a breath, got on my knees, and booked it to the hallway corner. I paused, took a tiny peek back at the glass, and there he was again, motionless, staring. I was freaking out, wondering if he'd seen me dash across the room. I just continued back to the master bedroom where the girls were. Once we were together again, the baby calmed down, and the pounding stopped. I quietly called my grandfather, who owned the house. That's when I broke down, crying, more terrified than I'd ever been in my life. I explained everything to him. He asked me if I saw the man's face, and I told him it was too dark to make out any features. That's when he said, "Child, that was not a burglar. It wasn't even human." My heart sank. My chest ached when he said that. I sobbed even more, and so did my cousin and aunt. We tried to stay quiet, still afraid the man might be lurking outside, listening. We waited until morning when my grandfather and other relatives arrived. We ran into their arms, crying, a complete mess. They decided to perform an Nosleep ceremony to figure out what had happened. It turned out that thing wanted the baby. They burned paper as an offering of money, and after that, it disappeared, never to bother the house, the family, or the baby again. I still get scared every time I think about it. I'll never go back to that house, even if the entity wasn't after me. Story 12, Deceased Mother of an Ex-Boyfriend. I was with my ex-boyfriend for 6 years, during which time he lost both his mother and only brother, just a year and a half apart. Since we were dating at the time, I attended both funerals. Things eventually didn't work out between us, and we went our separate ways. I moved on, got married, and about a year into my marriage, I gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. I hadn't thought about my ex or his family in a long time until recently. One early Saturday morning, after putting my baby back to sleep, I decided to get some more rest myself. It was only 6:30 a.m., so I thought I'd take the opportunity to nap. About 30 minutes into my sleep, although I wasn't fully asleep, I could hear my husband getting up to use the restroom. When he returned, he sat at the edge of the bed and turned on the computer. Our bedroom was small, so we often used the computer from the bed. I could hear him typing and music softly playing. I felt like I was awake, but my eyes were still closed. Then, all of a sudden, I felt someone sitting at the foot of the bed. This startled me because, aside from my husband and me, no one else was home. My husband was sitting next to me, so who could possibly be sitting at the end of the bed? Feeling a chill, I decided to peek. And there she was, my ex-boyfriend's mother, dressed in her traditional white monk shirt with a pink and green sash around her waist and a black velvet top adorned with small pink roses. Shocked, I suddenly felt a coldness sweep through the room, even though it was the middle of summer. I could feel my husband adjusting the blanket on me, but the mother still sat there, quietly looking down. After what felt like forever, she finally stood up and walked out of the bedroom. As I lay in bed, I could hear the jingling of her money belts as she walked down the hallway. As soon as she disappeared, I sat up and asked my husband if anyone else was home, even though I knew the answer. I told him what I had just experienced and later that night called my mother, who is a shaman. She initially told me it was probably just a daydream since it happened early in the morning. But when I explained that I was half awake and fully aware of my surroundings, she changed her tone and said, "Then she probably really came to visit you." I never really figured out why she came to visit me, but I'll never forget that image. Story 13, Terrifying Comfort. Growing up, I was not the prettiest nor the wisest within all my 3 sisters. In other words, I was the unperfect daughter. I remember always being extremely sensitive and crying almost to everything. This one night I got into a really bad fight with my older sibling, and because I was too mad at the moment, and stubborn, I refused to sleep in the room with them and preferred to sleep outside in the living room alone. At first there was nothing much to it, until the clock struck midnight. I started hearing heavy footsteps walking outside my front porch as if it's about to come inside. The weirdest thing was that the motion sensor's porch lights did not go off, leaving the perimeter pitched black. Panicking in fear, my body stiffened up and tears began to roll out of my eyes. I tried to take my eyes away from the window by covering my head with my furry blanket, until the footsteps stopped. I remained silent for a good minute or so and removed the blanket from my head. Right then, I felt a hot breath on my neck and ear, and honestly, it almost seemed like that thing was whispering something to me. My body froze and I started to cry harder. The thing began to stroke my hair with its tiny palm, and then I finally caught what it was trying to say. "Don't cry, child, I'm here now. I will love you." I couldn't take any more breaths in as I was staring straight at this thing. Its hair was really long, covering its face, but somehow, I can see her mouth and slit up jaw. The really creepy thing was that it was licking my tears with her wicked long tongue repetitively, chanting the same lines earlier over and over. I closed my eyes shut, waiting and hoping my life would end, but surprisingly, as soon as I opened my eyes, it disappeared and the porch light finally went on. Stupidly, I sprinted to the window to reassure myself that it was just a dream, but sitting on my porch was a strange-looking black cat. For some reasons, it looked as if the cat had the same exact smile that thing did. The cat then faded off into the darkness of the night, leaving my heart pounding in fear. Ever since that day, I started shedding a lot of hairs. My mother was concerned and finally took me to a shaman to see what was going on with me. Sitting on the couch and pretending to be uninterested on what he has to say, I eavesdropped and heard him told my mom, "Your child have a very sad and negative soul. Because she contains so much negative energy, it's almost as if her soul is calling out to all the other lonely spirits out there to come comfort her." The thing that was with her that night was a motherly spirit that is looking for a child to care for because she had lost her own. Terrified, my mother asked him what to do and why am I shedding so much hair. He responded, "She's shedding hair because that thing and many others would come to comfort her by stroking her hair every night. But they have no intentions to harm her though. Just prepare a ritual ceremony for your child and everything should be okay." After the ritual ceremony, my night returned to normal, but the very strange thing is that every time I break down or cry myself to sleep at night, I still feel that same presence on me, almost as if it never left. Thank you for taking the time to listen. If you enjoyed the content, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to support future videos. Wishing you all good health.